there is one commodity that caused the rise of the modern economy that we knew today. Nope, it's not oil. 500 years ago, long before oil becomes the most sought after commodity in the world, there is one spice that has been craved by the nobilities in Europe since the ancient times. Let me tell you about the story of nutmeg and how nutmeg trade shaped the modern economy. Nutmeg is a spice derived from nutmeg seed, which is grounded before use for anything. It can be used as a flavor enhancer, food preserver, or for medicinal purposes. Since the 1st century AD, the ancient Romans has known to use nutmeg in their cooking, just for upper class obviously. It was used in cakes, pastry, bread, and meat, which were already a luxury food in the ancient world. During the Age of Discovery, Europeans started to explore sea routes to directly seek the sources of spices, including nutmeg. Only a handful of Arabian traders knew the origin of nutmeg, and they managed to keep it as a trade secret. According to Tomepires Summa Oriental, after the fall of Malacca in 1511, the exact location of nutmeg was uncovered a year later. Nutmeg found to be grown only in Banda Islands in the middle of Maluku Islands, also known as Spice Islands. Portuguese tried to gain control of the nutmeg, but there were Spanish, Dutch, and British traders already gained their footing in Spice Island in the 16th century. As a Cornell historian, Eric Tagliacozzo mentioned that in the 1600s, the Dutch and the British were kind of shadowing each other all over the globe, which means that at that time, the Dutch and the British were contested against the riches in Spice Island and also at the same time in the New World of America. After kicking out Portuguese from Spice Island, Dutch controlled Banda Islands with bloodshed. The Dutch massacred the population so much that the number of population in Banda Islands plummeted from 15,000 people to less than 1,000 people in less than 5 years. The Dutch monopoly of nutmeg trade under Verenigde Oost-Indische Company, or better known as VOC, was so brutal, any islands with nutmeg trees were uprooted and its inhabitants killed. Smuggling nutmeg trees or even a single seed from Banda Islands is punishable by death. To prevent replanting, nutmeg seeds were covered with lime to make it infertile. Banda Islands even being militarized by the construction of Fort Belgica, the largest Dutch fort outside Europe. But there was one problem though, which is Britain is actually already has its footing on the nearby Run Island. Run Island is so near to the Banda Islands, which is about 20 kilometers southwest, and it also produces nutmeg. As a result, Dutch waged war against British in Spice Island twice. In 1667, the Treaty of Breda was signed primarily between British and Dutch to settle down the competition once and for all. Dutch is more than happy to retain its control on Banda Islands and nearby Run Island and let the control of Manhattan into the British hand. Yes, it is Manhattan, New York, that has been traded by Dutch in favor of these islands, a faraway volcanic islands which was the only major producer of nutmeg in the world. VOC fell into decline as its complicated management structure and trade competition with British and French traders in India and East Asia subsequently marked the end of VOC in 1799. Pierre Pauvrat, a French missionary in East Asia, clandestinely smuggled nutmeg and cloves from Strum Islands, one of the islands in Spice Island, in 1754 during its quest for spice. Unlike other islands, Dutch could not destroy nutmeg trees in Seram due to its inhospitable locals. And just to add a little bit, Seram Islands in Malay language means scary island because of its fearsome indigenous people. Armed with diplomatic skills and basic Malay language, he convinced the local rulers to give him nutmeg trees as they all despised of Dutch atrocities in Spice Island, in return of nutmeg trees to be brought to Mauritius, then a French colony. Bourgeois Engineers Act thus ended Dutch monopoly on nutmeg trade, pushed its price lower than ever. After the demise of VOC, British took over Spice Island between 1799 until 1817 to prevent French control on the islands. British took the opportunity to take nutmeg trees out from Spice Island and replanted it in British colonies such as Singapore, Penang, and Sri Lanka. In 1843, nutmeg was introduced in Grenada from a ship which made a brief stop en route to England. It happens that the very ship have nutmeg trees on board which later disembarked and planted in Grenada. As a result, the nutmeg price dropped down further that the common people could afford nutmeg for daily cooking. Nutmeg is Grenada's most important export. It even appeared on Grenada's flag. Grenada constitutes about 40% of the current world nutmeg supply, second after Indonesia, where the Banda Islands is located as part of Maluku within modern Indonesia. Nutmeg trade is a lucrative but a risky business as it involves great distance across the Atlantic and Indian Ocean, which could take 1 year to complete a single journey. The extravagant distance and risk of nutmeg trade call for more stable and reliable form of funding. The foundation of VOC in 1602 also marks the first initial public offering or IPO, which offered its stocks to the interested public. Previously, a trade expedition were a one-off event when a company will be liquidated as it returned from a single trade voyage. All cargoes were sold, including the ship. However, the risks are tremendous as the ship could be ransacked by pirates, capsized, or simply lost in the middle of the endless sea. In addition, the investment of this single voyage was often only by invitation by some select inner circles of businessmen in the Netherlands. When VOC offered its stocks to the public in 1602, it was a step to increase and diversify its capital. Thus, it is common for major companies to offer its stocks to interested public, which is still happen today. To the moon! Nutmeg trade has created the first stock exchange since the VOC stocks were publicly bought and the buyer need to wait for 10 years for the return. It is possible to sell the stock to another person for instant cash. Previously, trade stocks are only traded among trading elites and the trade company often closed after a single ship voyage, which makes stocks rare among the common public. As a result, VOC need an exchange building to manage its stocks and bonds. Amsterdam Stock Exchange is the world's first stock exchange, established in 1602 and is still open until today as Euronext Amsterdam. The brutal control of VOC over nutmeg trade has created the first global supply chain. Previously, an item was passed into so many hands, the producer and its origin were obscured. For example, it is very rare for a merchant to trade in the entirety of Silk Route. Instead, the spices, silk and tea were passed through markets and passed through so many hands, which makes the supply limited and the price prohibitively high. VOC has implemented a strict through processing which the production, processing, transport and distribution were handled by a single company. Previously, most of the production of any commodities were local in nature. The production only involved the producer and the transport and retail by the other businesses. And lastly, no matter how a corporation tries to hold a grip on a commodity, there is always a loophole on trade networks. Dutch successfully monopolized nutmeg trade between Asia and Europe, but not the whole trade. The argument is simple. No kingdom in Asia bought nutmeg from the Dutch ever. Records of Pierre Pauvra in 1770 even showed that the Malay and Chinese merchants secretly trade nutmeg in Manila, albeit in much smaller scale. Then why there was no crackdown on these merchants who sold nutmeg outside Dutch control? The answer? Underground trade. Pauvra himself could access to these secret networks by his diplomatic skill and basic Malay language. The hunt for nutmeg has shaped the first structures of the modern economy, particularly in the form of capitalism. Nutmeg has brought us stock exchange, IPO, and global cooperation, while the atrocities of the quest for nutmeg monopoly should not be forgotten. Globalization unnecessarily opened a free trade world. In fact, it was monopoly which opened the opportunity to globalize the world, which is not much different than today. Just look at oil. Only 10 national oil companies control most of the global oil supply, and the diamond is controlled by the beers, while Ferrero, the owner of Nutella, is the buyer of about half of the global hazelnut supply. Do anyone care for a chocolate spread sprinkled with nutmeg?